Okay, picture this. You're in the grocery store, it's maybe Saturday morning, and you're just staring at this, huge wall of coffee
Right.
or chocolate.
The candy aisle, yeah. You're trying to make a good
You're
choice.
trying to make a good choice, and then you see it, the sticker,
The little green
the,
frog. Or the person holding a basket.
the Fair Trade logo.
Exactly. You know the ones. Rainforest Alliance, organic, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you see that logo and you feel this sense of relief. You think, okay, my money is doing some good.
Mm-hmm. The assumption is that these organizations, these certifiers, are on the front lines.
Right. You picture them parachuting into places where the rules are, completely broken or non-existent, and they're there to fix things.
It's sort of a knight in shining armor story we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
That they go where the need is greatest to fill a void in the system.
They're the fixers.
Yeah.
But what if that entire assumption is not just a little bit off, but almost completely backward?
I'd say you've been reading the research we're digging into today. I certainly have. Today we are unpacking a really fascinating and frankly kind of a provocative new paper. It was just published this year, 2026, in the Journal of International Business Policy.
The title's a bit of a mouthful. It's Advancing the Understanding of Voluntary Sustainability Standard Organizations Geographic Diffusion.
It's total mouthful, but the findings inside, they're kind of exploitive. They completely flip the script on how we think global sustainability actually works.
They really do. The core finding is that these organizations, let's call them VSSOs, they don't flock to what the paper calls institutional voids.
They don't go to the lawless frontiers.
No, they flock to the safe harbors. They go where national institutions are already strong.
Which is such a paradox. The paper is this massive network analysis, right? They looked at 131 of these agri-food VSSOs. So that's your coffee, cocoa, tea, bananas.
Across 152 countries. And the pattern was just undeniable. They are not replacing broken systems. They're partnering with strong ones.
So if a country already has good rules, why do they need the sticker? Why does the castle need a knight in shining armor if it's already secure?
Well, that's the puzzle. But before we get into it, we have to be really clear about one word the paper uses constantly: institutions.
Right, because when I hear institutions, I think of, big granite government buildings, parliament, the courts.
And that's the trap. For this paper and for our deep dive today, we have to think much broader. When the authors say institutions, they're not just talking about government. They mean the rules of the game.
The country's entire operating system.
Exactly. It's the formal laws, yes, but it's also the informal rules, the processes, and, this is crucial, the enforcement. It's knowing a contract will hold up. It's knowing your money is safe in a bank. It's the software an economy runs on.
Got it. So the rules of the game. And for a long time, the thinking was this governance void theory, that these VSSOs exist to fill in the gaps where those rules fail.
That was the idea, and frankly, the hope. That if a country has, say, weak labor laws or terrible environmental enforcement, if the software is buggy, these private groups come in and act as a patch, a substitute.
But this paper says, nope.
It pretty much argues the opposite. It suggests VSSOs act a lot more like multinational corporations. They're strategic. They're looking for efficiency and low risk. And they rely on something the authors call institutional complementarities.
Institutional complementarities. That sounds like a very academic way of saying we need help.
It is. It just means they work better when they have a partner. They don't want to do all the heavy lifting alone. They want to operate in countries where the domestic institutions, those rules of the game, are already strong enough to support their work.
So they actively avoid places where weak rules make it too expensive or too risky.
Precisely. They're not the substitute teacher in a chaotic classroom.
They're the guest lecturer who prefers the honors class that's already well-behaved.
That's a very good way to put it. A little cynical, maybe, but the data backs it up. And it's not just about being lazy. It's about the very real mechanics of getting coffee from a farm in one country to your cup in another.
Okay, so let's get into those mechanics. The paper breaks it down, right? The first big one is trade support.
Yes, hypothesis one. And it was strongly supported by the data.
So this is literally just about moving stuff.
It is. Think about it. You can grow the most perfectly sustainable, bird-friendly, organic coffee in the world. But if you can't get it out of the country because customs is a nightmare, or the roads are terrible, or the port is corrupt,
that certification is completely useless.
the sticker on the bag means nothing if the bag never leaves the warehouse. The study found a really strong correlation with things like a country's trading food score and its rural access index.
So countries that make it easy to export food get more VSSOs.
Significantly more. It's like you
Yeah.
said, you don't build a high-speed train where there's no electricity. You need that export backbone first. VSSOs are part of a global value chain. And if the chain is broken at the first link, they go somewhere else.
Okay, that makes a lot of practical sense.
Yeah.
You can't certify what you can't ship. But what about the farmers? It's not like you can just sprinkle some sustainability dust on a crop and call it a day.
No. And that brings us to the second big pillar, technical assistance institutions. The switch to sustainable farming is hard. It's technically demanding. You have to learn about soil management, shade crops, how to document everything for an audit.
And who teaches them that?
Well, you'd think the VSSO does. But the paper found they cluster in countries that already have a strong capacity to teach farmers these things. They looked at metrics like a country's statistical capacity score.
Wait, statistical capacity? Why would a coffee farmer care if their country is good at statistics?
It's a proxy. It's a sign that the country can manage complex projects, gather data, and probably has good agricultural extension services. Experts who actually go out and train farmers.
Ah, I see. So if the country is already teaching its farmers how to upgrade, it just lowers the cost for the VSSO to come in.
It lowers the cost immensely. The paper calls it absorptive capacity. The VSSO brings the new rule, but the local institutions help the farmers actually absorb it. Otherwise, the VSO has to build an entire education system from scratch.
And that's expensive. It sounds like these groups are really, really focused on avoiding overhead.
They want the country to have done the prep work. They're maximizing their efficiency.
Speaking of money, this is where the paper got really interesting for me, the financial part.
Yes, the financial foundation. This finding was particularly strong.
We think of these standards as a type of aid, We pay more for the coffee to help the farmer. But this paper shows that VSOs actually follow the money. They follow the banks.
That was hypothesis 3, and it was strongly supported. They found a huge positive correlation between VSSOs being present and a country's access to finance score.
Explain that. Why does a certification group care about the local banking system?
Because becoming sustainable is expensive. It's capital intensive. To get that certification, a farmer might need to replant their entire crop. They might need new irrigation equipment. And they definitely have to pay for the audit itself.
And the VSSO doesn't pay for that?
Not usually,
Yeah.
no. The cost of upgrading, of getting certified, falls on the farmer or the cooperative.
That's the sustainability squeeze that you read about.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
So the VSSOs, they need to find suppliers who can actually afford to do all this. They look for countries where the financial system, the banks, the credit unions, is healthy enough to give loans to farmers.
Wow. So that just turns the whole charity idea on its head. They aren't going to places where farmers are desperate for cash to give them a lifeline.
They're going to places where farmers can already get a loan to pay for the privilege of being certified. It's risk management for the VSSO. If they set up in a country with no credit, the farmers will fail to meet the standard because they can't afford it.
So they need functional banks as a partner. Unbelievable. Okay, so strong trade, smart farmers, working banks. What about the human side? So many of these stickers say no child labor. Surely this is where they go to the worst places to fix things.
You'd think so.
Mhm.
If you're a doctor, you go where some people are.
Right.
But the data on social protection institutions, again, suggests the opposite. The study looked at things like the multidimensional poverty index and child labor stats.
Don't tell me.
VSSOs are more present in countries with stronger social protections, lower poverty, less child labor to begin with.
So they're certifying that there's no child labor in countries that already have systems to prevent child labor.
To a large extent, yes. And this comes back to the big brands. The coffee companies, the chocolate companies, they are terrified of a scandal.
Reputation risk.
Massive reputation risk. If a brand sources from a country with unchecked child labor, the risk of an expose is huge, even with a sticker on the package. But if they source from a country that already has a baseline of protection-enforced laws, social safety nets, it's just safer.
That's so ironic. They aren't going to the places with the worst labor rights to fix them. They're going to places that are already pretty decent to avoid the headache.
They're certifying the safe bets. It's easier to verify compliance when the whole system around you is already pushing in the same direction.
Okay, I think I'm getting the picture. It's about finding a country that's already done its homework. But now we have to talk about the real shocker in this paper, the environmental piece.
This is the big twist.
Yeah, because I assumed, so many of these are eco-labels, right? It's literally in the name, Rainforest Alliance, organic. They must love countries with strong environmental rules.
That was hypothesis 4. The authors absolutely expected to find a positive link between VSSOs and strong national environmental institutions. Not supported. The data shows zero statistically significant correlation.
Zero. You mean none?
Effectively none. It didn't matter if a country had strong environmental laws or weak ones. It had no bearing on where these agri-food VSSOs chose to operate.
That's stunning. We just established they love strong rules for everything else. Trade, finance, labor. Why on earth would they not care about environmental rules?
The authors dig into this, and they have a couple of theories. The first one is about conflicting goals. Remember, these are agri-food VSSOs. Their number one goal is still productivity. It's about export.
Getting the cocoa out of the country.
Right. And sometimes, very strict national conservation laws can actually get in the way of commercial agriculture.
So they might see strong eco-laws as a barrier to business.
Potentially. The other theory is what they call the Goldilocks problem. If a country's environmental rules are too strict, it raises costs for the farmers, making them uncompetitive. Too hot. If the rules are too weak, it's a reputational risk. Too cold. So, faced with that, it seems they just become indifferent to the local rules. They bring their own checklist, their own standard, and they just focus on that.
So they're basically creating their own little green bubble and ignoring the broader environmental context of the country they're in.
That's what the data suggests. They are hypersensitive to the institutions that affect their business operations, like trade and banking, but seem to be blind to the national environmental governance system. It really challenges the idea that they're there to bolster a country's green mission.
So what does this all mean for us, for the person listening who just wants to buy a good cup of coffee?
Well, for that conscious consumer, it really changes what that sticker on the bag means.
It's not a charity donation to a broken system.
No.
Yeah.
It most likely means you're buying from a producer in a country that was already pretty well organized when it came to trade and finance. You aren't necessarily supporting the most desperate farmers. You're supporting the most efficient farmers in the most convenient countries.
That's a tough one to process, but important. And what about for policymakers in those countries? If you want to attract these premium buyers, what's the lesson?
The old advice might have been pass more green laws. This paper says, no, that's not it. You need to fix your banks. You need to fix your ports and your customs bureaucracy.
You fix the economic plumbing first.
Exactly. The burden is on the country to build the foundation that allows its farmers to even afford to be certified. And this trend is only going to intensify with things like the new mandatory EU regulations on deforestation.
Right, the EUDR. That's going to make companies even more scared of risk.
Absolutely. The prediction is that companies will flee risky zones with weak institutions even faster. They'll cluster even more in the safe, well-organized countries. We could see a great divergence.
The gap between the institutional haves and have-nots just gets wider.
It could, yes. It's a trend towards clustering where it's safe and efficient.
Wow. We started this deep dive thinking about a sticker on a coffee bag, and we've ended up talking about the fundamental inequality of the world's trade infrastructure.
It's all connected. The sticker is just the visible tip of a huge institutional iceberg.
So to sum this all up, we've learned that VSSOs are not knights in shining armor. They're strategic players that need strong partners, specifically in trade, tech, and finance.
And crucially, they seem to operate almost independently of a country's own environmental rules, focusing more on commercial logic.
Which brings us to the final thought, the thing for you to chew on.
If these sustainability organizations effectively ignore a country's own environmental institutions and they actively avoid the places where governance is weakest, are they really driving global ecological change?
Or are they just certifying the most efficient producers in the most convenient locations? Are we changing the world or just putting a gold star on the parts that are already working? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
See you next time.